Hey there, everybody. Matt Carter here.
I'm Jessica Carter from CARTERMATT.com.
This video is a discussion about Blue Bloods Season 10, but this is not your ordinary discussion about Blue Bloods. Usually on Friday nights, Jessica and I, we gather around our metaphorical dinner table here and we talk through everything with every episode. And we're coming off of episode 13, but I think both of us kind of have the same opinion about episode 13 is it's not great, and really
It was a bit of a snooze for me.
and that's really been kind of the tendency for a number of episodes in season 10, where it feels like the show is in a little bit of a creative rut. And I think what we want to try to figure out how to do here is it's almost like we're giving Blue Bloods an intervention in some ways, where we recognize there's a problem, but then because we love the show, we want to see it better and we want to see it change and evolve. So what are the ways to do this? We're going to analyze the problem and try to find some solutions throughout. Before we do, though, if you like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other updates.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Jamie and Eddie of it all, because I feel like in season 9 so much hype was built around that wedding, and we have been salty about the lack thereof of a wedding.
Yeah, it really kind of sucked that they not only brought us through episodes with the journey of the wedding and the planning and the dress and the everything, but even their promotional stuff was a wedding invitation. You're invited, we're all invited, and then we were invited to nothing. They shut the doors on us right when we got to the church while we're waving our invitations.
Yeah.
And it feels like it kind of, we were salty about that. I'm still salty about that. But going into season 10, I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a chance. I'm going to see what they do with them now. And it feels like they just haven't found the right footing with them yet. They've been arguing a lot more since they've gotten married. There's just been a little more sort of like friction that's going on. We've had a couple nice moments at home, so there's been that. But that beautiful work dynamic between them is just gone. And I kind of thought that was going to get wrapped up in November, to be honest. That they would find a way, maybe that they wouldn't be able to work together again, I get it, but that they would find a way to make it so that they could at least be on the same schedule at work, so that their paths would cross, cases might cross, stuff would happen.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that Blue Bloods, I think in kind of a recent form of it, like season 8, season 9, I think what worked for Blue Bloods was that Jamie and Eddie, they may not be the entirety of the show, but I think they brought an injection of lightness into Blue Bloods. Their storylines were often lighthearted at times. There was humor in it, and if nothing else, there was a little bit of romance, and there was something that just, if the storylines were really dark elsewhere, you could kind of go to these two and smile a little bit. And you don't get to smile all that often in Blue Bloods sometimes.
Yeah, and they are really kind of the only couple that's happening on this show, because the rest of the Reagans are either widowed, divorced, and not together, not with anybody right now. And that's all great and fine and whatever. And it is part of the Reagan story to kind of be on their own. But it's also nice to see that there is one kid that is with somebody, and to see what that dynamic is and how that fits into a group of people who are not with anybody.
So, I think the question then becomes, okay, how do you fix Jamie and Eddie? And I think the simplest answer here is, we've talked about trying to get them on the same work schedule and all that, but more so than like logistics on the show, I think you just need to find a way to shift that tone again. So you have, if you're going to do this same format, which I'm not necessarily just sold on, I think you need to bring a little bit more just lightness or humor, just some of the fun and flirtatiousness back to the two of them, where just because they're married, it doesn't mean that like a lot of the sparks are just gone and you're left with just conflict all the time.
Yeah, and that seems to be trouble with a lot of shows, that it's always this fun, will they, won't they, and then they get married and then nobody knows what to do with them anymore. It's like, oh, maybe we'll give them some kids, and then they really don't know what to do. And I always go back to the same example because it's the show that's really done it the best, is Bones. They did such a good job bringing together the two main characters, having them married, have a kid, have a second kid, and they were still so interesting, and there was a lot of cool dynamics still between them. They didn't They didn't get boring. They didn't have to throw in like an affair or something secret or break them up. It was just the writers did a great job. And I get that it's hard to make married people interesting and still kind of fun and crazy, but it's still there. It should still be there.
I think the lack of finding just that balance for Jamie and Eddie, I think that's one reason why it feels like because we shouldn't really be talking about the wedding controversy anymore because we're so far removed from it, but because these other problems are there for the two of them, I think it sort of amplifies kind of everything else.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, they're not working together anymore, okay, but at least we have the wedding coming up. And now it's like, okay, we don't have the wedding coming up, they're not working together anymore, they're on different schedules, they never see each other, like it's just on top, like, and that's why I was saying I feel like this should have been wrapped up in November. Find a way for them to at least be on the same schedule at the office, because the thing that, as much as I enjoy them being together, I really enjoyed them working together, or at least talking cases together. Like, give me something.
So the other, to me, one of the biggest issues that Blue Bloods is having, just outside of any individual character, is it's got a format that's very stringent. And I think at times that works rather well. We get a family dinner every week, and I'm certainly not advocating to get rid of that. But you have these individual storylines every time, but they're often very short, and we get maybe 10 or 15 minutes with each character an episode, and then that storyline ends, and then you don't see it again. You don't hear about it again. And, procedural television, it's still big and it still has a place. But when you start to feel like you're seeing, okay, this is the umpteenth case of police brutality, or, friendly fire, or here's another case involving kind of a reasonably high-profile person that Danny and Tobias are taking on, it feels a lot right now where we're watching sort of the same thing week after week. I mean, how do you fix this?
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure how they can fix it, except, well, actually I do. I have an idea. And
okay,
the idea that I have is, and people may not like this idea, but I'm going to throw it out there anyways. So my idea is to actually just focus in on one or two characters per episode. So instead of, we've got the Jamie story, we have the Aaron story, we have what's going on with Frank, we might also have a Henry story, there's too many stories going on, and then you have a really good, here's a great example. So last night we had this storyline that was going on with Jamie about the other cops that were throwing personal information over to a doctor to help a doctor stay afloat during a time where like a bigger medical center just opened beside them. This was could have been a really good storyline. This is something that hasn't really been done a lot on TV. We haven't seen a lot of this. But it was such a flash in the pan. It was here, it was gone. It may have been 5 minutes of screen time. And this is something that, like, say, they took out maybe two other stories and gave it a bigger arc. It's still a bottle episode. It doesn't have to be an arc where it goes into another episode and keep it on. You can still stay procedural, but give the time to these stories to develop into something that we'll be talking about for the rest of the year. Like that Eddie undercover story. I was super hyped for that story. I thought it was going to be so good. And it was, again, like a flash in the pan. She just went from, hey, I'm undercover. Hey, now I'm your best buddy. Now I'm actually meeting the guy. Like, it just went like so fast instead of the real time it takes to go undercover and really build those relationships. So my suggestion is that some weeks maybe we don't get Aaron, or we don't get Jamie and Eddie, or I know we're always going to have Frank, but that there's smaller bits for some of the characters to make a bigger story for another character, and then switch it out the next week.
I'm going to build on that a little bit, because I think this is a cool idea, and I think the immediate response will be like, well, why do I want to watch an episode where I don't get to see Danny, or I don't get to see whoever? But let's kind of frame it this way. Let's say, for example, we're going to use your Jamie and the doctor's example from this past episode, where we're going to do a whole storyline about that. how about we do an episode that is revolving around Jamie, and you see most of it through Jamie's point of view, but he's working on this, he's kind of trying to figure out what's going on at the precinct with the cops, so you get to see sort of sequences with that, but then maybe you have a couple of conversations with him and Frank, where he goes to Frank, and, we see some conversations between him and Frank about it, and then you kind of hear from Frank as well about some of the stuff he's dealing with.
Or maybe it could also have something to do with what's going on with Danny. Maybe there's some people in his department that are also participating in this. And that way you get everybody sort of involved in a couple of cases. That's one of the things that Criminal Minds does really well. And I know it's all one team, so it's different. But you still get little bits of personal story from the people on the team, but they're all involved in one case. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be all in the same case, but if you have a case where you've got like a Danny and a Jamie and Eddie all kind of working together on one thing, and then you have Frank doing something else, then there's more room for things that are going on. If maybe like Frank and Aaron's stories overlap, it kind of might help develop us better cases and better stories, because that has been really lacking this season for me.
I think really it's just sort of establishing breathability, where if you have like this Jamie story and you get to see sort of Aaron's story through Jamie and you get to see Frank's story through Jamie, it actually not only allows, Will Estes as an actor to like suddenly have this big meaty storyline, and I'm sure he would appreciate that, but it also actually gives us a real sense of time within the Blue Bloods world, and I'm always perpetually confused about this, because it's sort of like, when is this happening with Frank? Oh, it's nighttime now for Danny, and it's kind of all over the place. And I'm watching the final season of Power right now, and in that it's been kind of fascinating, because you actually get to see things kind of roughly in a real-time almost sequence, and I think Blue Bloods, it could benefit from something like that, where we get, your Jamie episode, you get your Frank episode, and the actors probably wouldn't have to really work that much more. It would just be, they would have a more demanding stretch, and then they would have sort of a lighter stretch after the fact.
Yeah, and it might help with some of the stories that are being recycled on the show. And I completely understand that it's 10 years in and there's only so many stories that they can tell.
Yeah.
But if they're taking a longer period of time with them, they may actually be able to craft them into something that it's like, yeah, we've seen this story before, but now we're seeing it in a different way because they have more time. The stories are just feeling very like quick, like a flash in the pan. They're here, they're gone, they're done, and now I don't remember it. Like, I'm even thinking back to just the stories this season. What is sticking out in my head? And the things that are really sticking out in my head are like the dementia Alzheimer's story that Henry had, and the Eddie one of her undercover. And the undercover story is sticking with me, one, because I was really hyped about it, and two, because I ended up being a little bit disappointed about it, because it just went so fast and it didn't need to play out like that.
Let's talk now about the idea of a story arc, because we've talked about sort of shaking up the format of the show so it could be more individual character based and you could see a lot of the other characters through that POV. But what about doing a 2-episode arc, a 3-episode arc? It's not like Blue Bloods is immune to this. Like, they've done arcs in some shape or forms before. But you brought up Criminal Minds earlier, and Criminal Minds has kind of evolved a lot over these past few years.
Yep.
And we're starting having a little bit more of an arc to that, where maybe you have a few episodes in a row that are linked, and you actually get to see more of a continuous build with some things, and things come around more often than, say, Blue Bloods doing a Delgado episode like one a year or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, NCIS, that's happening as well. That's been long a pretty procedural show, and they've been doing kind of the same thing, and they're both long-running shows like Blue Bloods, and it feels like maybe when you're getting a bit deeper into the show, you kind of got to take a couple chances.
I think so. And to me, this is fundamentally, I think, the biggest problem, is that 10 years in, I think Blue Bloods needs to do something different to get people talking about it, to get people, like, they got people excited because of the wedding, and we know how that ended, but at this point...
But people were talking about it. We saw publications talking about Blue Bloods that never talk about that show. Like, people, it was in the news.
Yeah, it was in the news, and now there's not really that much in the news, because we're just in a routine, and in some ways we're in a rut, and there's nothing that's really sort of standing out. And I think that Blue Bloods, it needs to challenge itself. And yes, it is risky to the core group of viewers to do, a 3-episode arc when viewers aren't necessarily used to it. But if you deliver something that's really, really good, I think people will respond to it, even if it's not their typical cup of tea with this show.
Absolutely. And I think that the viewers that Blue Bloods has are loyal. So they're going to be watching anyways. So if you've got something that's just 2 episodes, they're going to be tuning in regardless if it was an arc or it wasn't an arc.
Yeah. And, let's also just consider this. Donnie Wahlberg is a great actor when he's given really good material to work with.
Yeah.
Tom Selleck has not done 2 of the most iconic shows of all time, and this and Magnum P.I., for no reason. Very good actor. He can do a lot of strong, powerful stuff.
Yep.
There's great performances from start to finish. I think, why not challenge these actors, allow them to make the most of what they have, and allow us to sort of be challenged, where Blue Bloods can remain sort of our Friday night comfort food. You can still have the family dinner scenes, but also just give people something different to talk about. And so instead of us having to stage interventions for Blue Bloods and be like...
Yeah, like yesterday was one of the first times all season that we just didn't really do a review because both of us were like, what is there really to talk about in this episode? This episode was kind of a snooze. Like, I'm just not going to remember these stories. Except for that the Jamie story was so fast and that could have been something. But it wasn't.
And what's more fun for us? Coming on here and being like, that was awesome, and here's why it's awesome, and we want to be amped up, Blue Bloods. It's sort of like, us as reviewers, it's sort of like the Jamie and Eddie relationship, where it's sort of like, we want a spark as viewers so that we can sort of be engaged and do some different stuff.
And this is a show that Matt and I have long loved. We've watched the show a really long time, so for us to get to the point that we're kind of like, wow, that episode last night, I don't know about it. That's weird for us. That's not something that we normally ever face with this show. But this season, something needs to give a little bit. There's something off. It's not getting to where it needs to be. And every now and then we get Undercover Eddie or Delgado comes back, but still, I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I think it's time for Blue Bloods to really consider that. The ratings have been down in season 10. I think you gotta try to find a way to mix things up a little bit. But with that in mind, let's turn this over to you guys, because maybe we can all workshop some ideas. Just magically, some of the writers or whoever, the showrunner, is listening. Or maybe you guys don't agree and you think that this season is great. And if that's the case, let us know why.
And so let's just have a discussion about all this. And if you do like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and you can support us further by checking that link in the description to the CARTERMATT store. And we'll see you here next time.